Hi guys, yesterday we read through about half of chapter 22 of the Parker Inheritance, and Candace and Brandon had gone back to the high school to see if they could look at some more yearbooks from the 1950s, and they had just found one that had been vandalized with some pretty awful words in it, and Candace and Brandon found a way to make it funny because the person who vandalized it spelt it wrong. So that's where I'm going to start up again. "What's got you two laughing so hard?" Miss McMillan asked as she walked up to them. Brandon wiped the tears away from his face. "Racists don't know how to spell." "Come again?" Candace picked up the yearbook and handed it to her. "Someone vandalized this." Now that she had been laughing, the words didn't seem so powerful anymore. Miss McMillan read the page. "Oh, I see." Then she smiled. "And yes, if they're going to go through all the hassle to vandalize one of my books, you'd think they'd check their spelling." "Do you know who did it?" Candace asked. "Probably some knucklehead who was forced to work here during in-school suspension." She tucked the book under her arm. "I'll grab another one for you. You can take it with you. I should probably be locking up soon." "What about those photos?" Candace asked, nodding at the dolly. "Don't worry about them," she said. "Deacon Draper said he'd send someone later this week to pick them up. But if y'all could help me push them into the corner, I'd appreciate that." Candace and Brandon helped Miss McMillan move the photos. Once they finished, Candace took the Wallace and Perkins yearbooks from 1956 and 1957 and slipped them into Brandon's backpack. "I promise we won't mess them up." "I trust you," Miss McMillan said. "I hope you find what you're looking for." The sun seemed way too bright when Candace and Brandon pushed the door open and stepped onto the sidewalk. He glanced at his watch. "According to your schedule, we've got about 2 hours to kill before Milo's tied up in another activity." "Chili cheese dog time?" Candace asked. "Yep." Then he snapped his fingers and patted his pockets. "I think I left Tori's phone in the memorial room." He went to open the door. It didn't budge. He banged on it a few times. "Hello? Anyone in there?" Candace pulled out her mother's phone. "Any chance you remember Miss McMillan's number?" "No, but if I call my sister's phone, maybe Miss McMillan will hear it." He took the phone and dialed the number. "It went to voicemail," he said after a few seconds. "You can try again." The door directly to the left of them swung open. It would have smacked Candace in the head if she had been standing any closer. "What in the world is going on out here?" A thin man in khakis and a polo glared at them as he stepped outside. His gray hair was slicked back on his head, and his skin was red, like he'd spent too much time in the sun. "Hello, Mr. Rittenhauer." Brandon turned to Candace. "He's one of the assistant principals." Mr. Rittenhauer let the door bang shut behind him, then crossed his arms. "You didn't answer my question. What are you two up to?" "We're here for research," Brandon said. "We were in the memorial room." "Son, the only thing I hate more than a thief is a liar. Want to try that again?" Brandon frowned. "Sir, I don't understand." "I've been here all afternoon. There aren't any teachers here to let you into the school, much less the memorial room." He pointed to the parking lot. "There's only one car out here. It's mine." Candace rolled her mouth open. "Miss McMillan is in there right now, I promise. Just check. We'll wait here." "Like you would be here when I got back. You don't even look old enough to be high school students. Let me see your IDs," he said, snapping his fingers. I don't have an ID card," Candace said. "Me either," Brandon said. "Well, isn't that convenient?" the principal said. "What are your names and your phone numbers? I'll need to call your parents." "But we weren't doing anything wrong," Brandon said. "Watch your tone, young man." He stepped forward. "And what's in those backpacks?" Everything was happening too fast, and all wrong. Candace had seen her mother answer enough questions about her father to know how to handle people who were being rude or nosy. This was something else, something darker. The main door opened as she and Brandon unzipped their backpacks. Miss McMillan stepped outside. "Brandon, you forgot your—" "Oh, hello, Mr. Rittenhauer." The assistant principal's mouth sagged open. "Miss McMillan, what are you doing here? Where's your car?" "My cousin's car's in the shop, so I let her use mine for the day." Miss McMillan handed the phone to Brandon. "There you go, hon. Good thing I caught you before you left." Brandon kept his gaze on the ground as he stuffed the phone into his backpack. "Thank you," he mumbled. Miss McMillan frowned. "Brandon, Candace, everything okay?" "Everything's fine now," Mr. Rittenhauer said. "Just a little misunderstanding." He patted Brandon's shoulder, making him flinch. "You two go on home." Candace's hands had already turned into fists, and her eyes were stinging. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She knew that. So did Brandon. But that probably didn't matter. Thanks again for the books, Brandon said, finally looking up at Miss McMillan. His eyes were watering, but no tears spilled out. They grabbed their bikes and walked them from the building. She didn't turn around to see if Mr. Rittenhauer was looking at them. She didn't want to know. I guess we better bring our IDs next time, Brandon said. He sputtered out a bit of a laugh. I don't even have a real ID card, just one from school. Yeah, me too. They paused at the edge of the street. Can we take a rain check on those chili cheese dogs? He asked. I'm not really hungry anymore. Me neither, Candace said. But what about Milo? I'll take my chances, Brandon said. I just really want to go home. Candace nodded, then climbed on her bike and followed her friend. Chapter 23. Leanne Washington. July 25th, 1957. Leanne Washington walked into her bedroom and pulled back the curtain. Light flooded the room. Her husband groaned in bed. Get up, Dub, she said. It's almost 10. She returned to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. It would be her 3rd cup of the morning. She'd been up early, calling the ladies to organize another fundraiser. It seemed like there was always another battle to fight, and they all cost money. A few minutes later, Enoch Washington shuffled into the room. Thanks for letting me sleep in, he said, grinning. Game got a little crazy last night. He gave her a small kiss before picking up his mug. His scruff tickled her cheek, but not in a good way, not like it used to. Coach Douglas called. She tried to keep her voice level and quiet. Dub called Coach Douglas by his first name, but he was the only Negro bold enough or crazy enough to do that. Let me guess, Dub settled into his chair. He told you about the bet with Tommy Turner. He did. She picked up her mug, then set it back down, splashing coffee on the table. What in the world were you thinking? Don't yell, he said. Little Dub, I sent her out, she said. Where? You know she ain't allowed to be out of this house without supervision. That's your rule, not mine. She grabbed a napkin and wiped her coffee. Siobhan's at the store running some errands. Don't worry. She ain't off to see that boy, though that's the least of your problems right now. Dub poured sugar into his cup. It's just a friendly game, babe. Don't give me that. This is about you and your pride. She shook her head. You just can't pass up a fight, can you? Those white boys bragged way too much. I just want a little justice. You want retribution against any white man that ever looked at you the wrong way. She tried drinking her coffee again. Don't you know how hard we worked? How much we sacrificed? But now we're finally making some real headway. And one day colored children will go to integrated schools. The NAACP won the Brown case 3 years ago, he said. Last I checked, our kids are still at Perkins, dealing with secondhand books and busted-up equipment. Just because you don't see the path doesn't mean it's not there, Leanne said. Progress takes time. We will succeed, but not if you keep trying to show up at the other school. That's not going to help our cause. He sighed, then took a sip of coffee, and then another. Finally, he said, What if you're wrong about integration? He put his hand up. Hear me out. I've been thinking about this for a little while. Take Althea Gibson. She graduated from Wilson, a Negro school up in Wilmington. Then she attended Florida A&M, a Negro college. Then she won Wimbledon. He snorted. She didn't need anything from them white folks. You mean except for the white folks who fought so she could even play? Leanne asked. They ain't all our enemy. And what happens if the schools do integrate? Dub continued. Leanne didn't think he was even listening to her. Do you really believe white folks are going to send their children to our school? They're going to shut us down, fire all of our teachers, and bus our kids off to the other high school. And I guarantee those teachers don't care about our kids. Coach Douglas does. Dub crossed his arms. If Adam really cared, he'd give up all that extra money he's making as athletic director and donate it back to the school. Or he'd step down so some of us could have a real shot at the position. Like you want to be athletic director, she said. With your temper, you probably would have been fired a long time ago. If not for Coach Douglas, anyways. He picked up his mug. Well, as long as he's in charge, I guess we'll never know. Leanne took a sip of coffee. Siobhan would be back soon, and she didn't want to argue in front of her. Things in this house were already strained enough with Siobhan refusing to play tennis, just to prove a point to her father. Leanne didn't agree with her daughter's choice, but she understood. Enoch, I followed you here to Lambert, even though I didn't want to come. I quit teaching and stayed home to raise our daughter because you asked me. Now I finally got something I'm good at, something I'm passionate about. and everything they're doing is putting that at risk. Like I said, it's just a friendly game, an exhibition. That's all, babe, I promise. A small part of Leanne wanted to believe her husband, but she had known Enoch for over 20 years. She knew when he was lying, even if he didn't know it himself. And I think we're going to stop right before chapter 24, because it's a pretty good stopping place. And I don't know if you noticed it while I was reading, but if you didn't, I would like you to go back and listen to chapter 23, because there is a quote that Leanne said that you may have heard before in this book. And it's pretty important. I don't think that it's a coincidence. So when you go back and listen and you find what quote I'm talking about, I want you to comment that underneath.